So I think the structure we'll do is that we'll give our own different perspectives of from the Dundee and Nottingham perspectives of trusted research environments and our different histories in that space. Um, so I shall start with my perspective, which will explain that I think will show the distinction quite clearly. So firstly, thank you very much for the invitation and for the opportunity to speak at this meeting today. It sounds really interesting and it sounds like an interesting area of research that I'm not at all familiar with. So yeah, it'd be interesting to follow more about the work you're doing. So as Michael said, I'm Chris Cole. I'm a reader in Health Informatics here at the University of Dundee in Scotland, and I am the co-director of the Health Informatics Centre, which is one of the safe havens in Scotland, which I'll explain in a bit more detail now. So Scotland and England and the rest of the UK have devolved. It's rather complicated. We have devolved part of our society, which includes health, and that includes health data as well. So we have managing, so although we have an NHS, there is a NHS Scotland and there's an NHS England, and so they've been running similarly, but also somewhat separately over the long term since the beginning, really. And in terms of health data research, in Scotland we've had a Scottish Safe Haven network for the last 10 years or so of managing routinely collected patient data for access to researchers for use to advance their research questions. And we have divided the country into 4 regions, and in each region there is a separate, what we call a safe haven, and they are allocated different health boards. So there are 14 health boards in Scotland. Some are larger than others, and they're allocated to a particular region and a particular safe haven for researchers to access their data. This is a completely parallel system to routine clinical use of the data for, if you go in to see your GP or you go into a hospital for an operation, that data is managed through completely different systems. And so we have 4 regional safe havens, and then we have a national safe haven. And the national safe haven gives you very high level data, nicely curated, well managed, and it's updated on a regular schedule. So things like deaths, cancer registries, prescriptions, those sorts of things, births, deaths, that sort of thing. Whereas the regional data areas have access to much more granular data like blood tests and accident and emergency arrivals and departures and GP letters and things like that. So that's the context of where we sit. And the Health Informatics Centre is one of these regions. We manage the East of Scotland region, and so we have access to about 2.1 million people's worth of data. And that's all people who have lived or died in the last 10 or 15 years in our region. And so we collect some are routine, are regularly updated, and some of them are one-off. So we have about 170 data sets available for researchers to access. But we also manage other data sets. So the Alleviate Pain Data Hub, we have a national data hub for managing chronic pain data, and it's part of a large UK consortium. We have, so our safe haven is an accredited safe haven through the Scottish Government, and we are an ISO 27001 accredited organization. And we have our environment in the cloud, in a public cloud environment, which we manage, and we have control of. And we also manage the data for a Scotland-wide biobank with 300,000 participants. And that's a consented data set rather than the routine patient data. And we've been supporting research for the last 20 years. We were established in 2004. We have nearly 400 research outputs allocated, that we've supported. And over the last 5 years, we've supported over 170 million pounds worth of research projects. And the centre itself, we run a whole suite of services that cover a wide range of research, which I won't go into detail, but there's a link there that you can look at to see in more detail. But we also run our own research program or set of programs. So either focusing on large scale imaging data, so 2 petabytes of imaging data. We are part of EU consortia on machine learning prediction of hypertension. And then the thing I'll be talking most about is open and transparent standardization for federalization of data across the UK in a safe and secure environment. And I think this is where Andy and I will particularly overlap. So, what is a trusted research environment? And everything's in the name, and unfortunately, the name is used very, very differently in different parts of the world, and even different parts of different industries in the UK. So these are just 5 names that we have been exposed to. So Safe Haven, as I've spoken about, a secure research service, secure processing environment, secure data environment, secure unified research environment, you name it. And it's any kind of combination of secure data research environment, trusted, there's probably exists somewhere across the globe. And they are establishments and environments specifically designed to work with sensitive data and mitigating any risks of leakage of privacy of data for the use of research, and is outside of operational work of using sensitive data. And it depends, these terminologies depending on which context you're in. And I'll be talking primarily about health and health data in Scotland. But the overarching principles comes from the 5 safes, which was a concept raised in 2008 by Felix Ritchie at the ONS, which is the census organization that manages the census data for researchers in the UK. And it has these 5 overlapping principles of safe people, safe projects, safe settings, safe data, and safe outputs. And all 5 of these are intentionally overlapping and fulfilling the needs of making sure that every step of the data pipeline from extract and collection to publishing in reports or in journals is done appropriately and trustworthy and safely, so that there are no or we've mitigated all the risks of data breaches at all points. And the HIC trusted research environment specifically, oops, sorry, trying to get rid of my window here. Right. And so, like I say, they're overlapping multi-layered security controls. So you can see in the top right in the schematic here that we have our data extracts from the NHS systems, which then we collect internally and within our own secure environments. And this is identifiable unconsented data that we have access to. And then when an approved research project has gone through the various ethical and approval processes, we provide a secure version of that data that has been de-identified and reduced down to only the parts of the data set that you need. So if you're doing a study on cancer, then you're not going to get, or breast cancer, you're not going to get information on brain conditions or other conditions, and you'll only get data for the years that you asked for, and the research access is time limited for the purposes of your research. So you have 1, 2, or 3 years depending to complete your work. And so that data is all made access to the researchers within the TRE, and only available to approved researchers of the research project who have gone through the appropriate training, and we know who they are and when they come from. And the other safes sit in there as well, in terms of the key one is that there is no copying of data, there is no screenshotting, there is no emailing of data or results to yourself for publication. You have to go through a specific airlock mechanism where someone in the safe haven of the TRE checks your outputs to make sure that there is no risk of disclosure of any personal information. So what does a TRE look like? So ours is like this. And you log in through a browser, through multi-factor authentication, and essentially it's a virtual desktop to a desktop machine instance that you have access to. And because our history comes from clinical research or epidemiological research, we primarily provide access to desktop statistical software packages like MATLAB and Stata and SAS. But we're getting more and more and very rapidly more interest to access to more open source tools like R, and scaling up to large scale imaging data sets so people can run AI workloads on those. And as I say, the access is highly restricted, but it looks like a desktop that you would use on your machine, whether it's Linux or Windows. We can provide either of those to you. So I'll be talking a bit more detail about a piece of work we've been doing over the last year or so, a couple of years now actually, which was funded by DARE UK, which is the standardized architecture for TREs. And actually, just as a little aside, it's quite fun trying to look at these stock images and looking, oh, that's quite a nice stock image. And it's kind of indicative of AI because you realize that actually there's a finger missing there in the image, and also the fingers are all manicured very, very differently. So, on the face of it, AI looks amazing, looks really good, but then when you dig down to the details, actually things are a bit concerning. And that's a real interest of mine in terms of managing access to patient data for machine learning requirements, because the results on the face of it look very, very good. But then when you dig down a little bit deeper, then there are potential biases and errors in that data that you need to be careful of. But I won't be talking about that in too much detail today, or any detail today. So what is the landscape, particularly in the UK, but also in Europe? There has been a wide-scale number of reports highlighting how important it is to make sure that we use data effectively, ethically, and appropriately for research, and that we do that in a controlled manner using trusted research environments. And that's not just in the UK; it's also in the EU with the European Health Data Space. And I'm also involved in a project called Entrust, which is the European Network of Trusted Research Environments. So this is growing worldwide, and similar things going on in Canada and Australia and the States. The current problem is that everyone has their own TRE, and they're all quite different. They have different platform choices, they have different development models, and they sit under different governance accreditations, especially when you're looking at international collaborations and federations. And that makes life challenging because there is no overarching agreement on what a TRE looks like. And that's where the Sartre project came in. So to try and find some standardization, some community-driven agreement as to, okay, what are the things that we need to have? And so we went through these three phases of the work during Sartre. And throughout, we worked transparently and we're completely open because it's important. I personally feel strongly about that. It's when we're talking about people's data, we need to be as transparent and as open about what we're doing with that to try and show that we're trying to be as careful as possible with everything, because any kind of obfuscation it looks like you're trying to hide things. So it's better to be open and public. And so we blogged, and our GitHub is open for people who are familiar with that, and so everyone can get involved if they need to. So we were very, very keen. We were a small project, and we were very keen to get access to everyone's knowledge and experience in the UK around their trusted and research environment. And so we asked very heavily, and we engaged widely with, and the shape of the project changed very rapidly at the beginning, and we responded to that with feature surveys. But what was most effective was 14 what we call collaboration cafes, which was essentially every fortnight we had an hour and a half slot on Teams that anyone could come in. We had a broad theme at each one, but essentially anyone could come in, have a discussion, and we'd capture that, and then that informed the specification as we wrote it. And we had around 60 organizations engaged with us and through that process. And like I say, we did this through GitHub, so it was all completely open and transparent and version, so we can see how the specification changed over time. And we also included the public. So we had public sessions, and we had public members on our research team, which was great. I'm a great fan of that. If people want to know more about how to use and include the public in your research, then please reach out, because they're a huge asset in research. And so they improved the specification by including statements about what we need to do in order to improve our transparency, and supported more inclusion about where things go wrong, and add information about that. And also changed how some of the statements were to be going forward. And then it helped us communicate what the Sartre project was trying to do. So good communication is important regardless of who you speak to. It doesn't need to be just members of the public. Between ourselves, it's really important too. So what is the Sartre specification? It's essentially a guide on how to build and run a TRE. We have 4 architectural principles of usability, maintaining public trust, observability, can't say it, standardization. And then we have 4 structural pillars of information governance, computing technology, data management, and kind of a supporting capabilities box of other things which we deemed were important. And there were 29 overall capabilities, and within those, we broke down to 160 statements of things that need to be considered when developing and running a TRE, and 75 of which we worked out as being the ones which came out to be mandatory. So you could almost see that the 75 mandatory Sartre specifications are the minimum set you need to have a working TRE. Now, so I should say this is version 1 of the specification, and we're going to be updating with a version 2, hopefully next year with new funding, and see how much this needs to be changed beyond that. I think we're pretty close. I'll talk a bit more about what input we've had. This is what the website looks like. You can read through and see what you have, but also there's a spreadsheet that's available on the website that you can download, and you can actually score yourself against this specification. And there's a kind of a self-assessment methodology where you can score yourself from 0 to 1, sorry, 0 to 2, where 0 means you don't do that thing. 1 means that you do it, but you think you could do it better, and 2 is like, well, you think you've done pretty much everything that needs to be done to fulfill that requirement. And there are some, like I say, there are almost 100 which aren't mandatory, so you can skip those. And this is what it can look like. So we've done a self-assessment exercise in Scotland across our 4 regional safe havens. So if you can see on the coloured banner on the right-hand side, we've color-coded this kind of like as a heat map of 0 to 2, and you can see where the similarities and the differences are between our TREs, and then you can just filter down to the mandatory ones. And we highlighted a couple where we were quite different in our how we graded those, and and that started a conversation and see where we could align ourselves across that. So it's a really great point of reference as a baseline to start a discussion. It's not hard and fast, and that's what I think we would like to do in the next phase. And so, like I say, the implementations of Sartre, so in the whole of the Scottish Safe Haven network now has a self-assessed themselves against the specification. To industry partners or people that we worked with in the past have also assessed themselves. Iridia have done a really nice blog detailing how they went through it, and Canna Medical have interestingly used it as a client specification requirement rather than them requiring third parties to fulfill their requirements before they will share software with that third party. Because obviously any data breaches reflect on the whole partnerships. So they don't want to be involved in those situations. And in NHS England, there's been a large change in how NHS is using data for research. And so we've been involved with them on that front, and they've been involved with us in trying to improve the Sartre specification. And I mentioned this earlier, in the EU, we are involved along with Nottingham and the Elixir Consortium. I mean, this is an Elixir-led project on the European Open Source Cloud on trying to develop a network and a federation of trusted research environments across Europe. It's a large consortium of 17 countries, 11 TREs, or as we're calling them, secure processing environments in this project. And there's a huge amount of experience in this project, so it's a really good test for the specification. And ultimately, the aim is to build a new blueprint from across the UK for trusted research environments. And I think Sartre allows us to do this, as I say, creating a baseline across very different areas. And it's open and transparent and adaptable, and that's a key driving force in my research. So that just leaves me to thank you for your time. And I don't know if there's going to be questions at some point, but you feel free to contact me if you wish. And I'd like to acknowledge my partners in the various projects that have led to this. And thank you very much.